I want to thank FAI for providing this opportunity for Adam Ortman and me to talk about our collaboration, bringing together exercise and brain health in programming for Activate Brain and Body. My background is not in fitness. I've worked in mind body medicine for over 40 years, specializing in stress physiology and biofeedback. And then about 10 years ago, moving into the area of brain health. And it's there and then that I discovered the power of physical activity, something you all already know. Physical activity is the most underappreciated anti aging compound currently known. The research is clear on that. And our goal today is to help you find a way to communicate this to your clients. Because once they get it, your job is a lot easier. And so, Adam, introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Adam Ortman, and much like Marie said, I want to thank FAI for allowing us to have the opportunity to share this information with you today. My background stems more in the exercise science field. I graduated from Miami University with a degree in kinesiology and health, and have been with Anytime Fitness now for roughly 10 years. I have a lot of different fitness and nutrition certifications throughout my time in the fitness field, and I've recently been introduced to the brain health field by becoming a certified brain health trainer. We're currently piloting our Activate program at our current facility, and we're very excited with the information and data we are gathering because we know it's going to make such a profound and positive impact within our communities in the near future. So we're very excited to share this, and thank you for taking the time to listen to us today.
So, Adam, let's start with talking about what potential brain health clients believe about their brain and their capacity to change it. And they know that if they come into a gym and do aerobic exercise, their heart gets stronger. And if they do strength training, their muscles get stronger. But the brain has long been a black box. It was only 30 years ago in the 1990s that the government declared the decade of the brain and devoted money to developing new techniques for studying it. Before that, the only way to examine the brain was through an autopsy. So, in general, your clients, let's say 50 and above, and many below 50 too, come in with a lack of information or incorrect information, kind of stuck with old beliefs. So, let's take a look at some of those beliefs. Here are some of the most common beliefs that my patients have about the brain and aging. They've been taught that you were born with all the neurons you will ever have and that they start dying off when you're in your 20s. I have a distinct memory of being in high school health class and the teacher telling us that. And even at the time, I thought, oh, that isn't good. They believe that dementia is an inevitable consequence of old age and that there's nothing that can stop the progression of cognitive decline. They've read in the news about the billions of dollars of drug trials that have failed for Alzheimer's disease. And so it's no surprise that when the University of Michigan did a survey in 2018 of adults 50 to 80, about half believe that they're somewhat or very likely to develop dementia. So your older client is likely to present worried or convinced that they are on the path to dementia and that there's nothing they can do about it. That's not a good place to start a coaching relationship. So, Adam, I'm wondering what it is that you found as people come in for a brain health program.
Marie, that's a great question. Within my setting of being more of a fitness facility, when we talk about brain health, at least initially when we launched this program and spoke about cognitive health and progress, we get the common themes of Sudoku, crossword puzzles, brain games with apps, right? That's the initial concept that they get of brain health. And much like you spoke about, Marie, they don't believe that they have much control over it. They think they can do things such as those crosswords and Sudokus, but they never really seem to understand how it impacts them or any of the applicable science of their actions. So I think it's very important that the education piece of the brain, which is such an amazing uh, part of the body, um, is truly examined and discussed within the client prior to this program. And you guys will see as this presentation goes on and the client learns about this concept a little bit more in terms that they understand the perception of brain health and brain training drastically changes from one of Sudoku, crossword puzzles, I just need to do trivia type of activities into more of a complex system that applies to their daily lifestyle.
In psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is the current dominant treatment paradigm. And the theory is that people get into trouble when they have faulty appraisals based on incorrect evidence. And we've presented a lot of the faulty appraisals and incorrect evidence that people have about their brain. And now we'd like to start to present correct evidence so that you can reboot your thinking about the brain if you need to and help your clients do the same. So, starting with my high school health teacher, Miss Savich, you were wrong. Adults do produce new neurons every day. That's what neurogenesis is. The estimate is about 1,500 a day in the hippocampus, which is the area of the brain important for learning and memory. People are curious about this and happy to know that they are making new brain cells. Also, Ms. Savich was correct that the brain does shrink with age. But the reality is, by latest estimate, there are 86 billion neurons in the adult brain. You see an artist's rendition of a neuron here on this slide. And many of them can live more than 100 years. But what is even more important to know is the capacity of the neurons to connect to each other in these information highways. You see the thicker axons, which deliver information away from the neuron, and the thinner dendrites, the filament-looking things, which bring information to the cell body. Each neuron has the potential for 10,000 connections, which means that by one author's estimate, the total number of potential brain states is more than the total number of atoms in the universe. This process of connecting between neurons is a dynamic one, and it's given rise to the term neuroplasticity. This term is very popular in the media, and it's usually only halfway understood. In this image, you see signals traveling to and from a cell body along axons and dendrites. This is an information highway, and the brain changes its physical structure with each experience. This change is what is meant by neuroplasticity. Neurons connect with each other to form networks through experience. Networks that are used strengthen. If they're not used, they weaken. And that's how we've come up with the phrase neurons that fire together, wire together. It's a physical change. On the next slide, we have a video of this process of neuroplasticity. You'll see the information traveling and forming new synapses, which are the connections between neurons. To summarize, the adult brain is a beautiful organ. Your first step in creating new beliefs for your clients is to replace that old image of a shriveling mess of plaques and tangles with the reality of immeasurable potential. Play that YouTube video on a loop. This leads to the other main negative belief that adults have, that dementia is inevitable and that there's nothing they can do about it. It's not only what they've been taught in the past, it's still the main message out there. For Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common form of dementia, the signature in the brain are plaques and tangles strangling neurons. Well-publicized drug trials have failed to halt that process. So most people believe there's nothing to be done. But not so fast. There's another story to be told here, too. My favorite way to tell the story is to talk about Sister Bernadette, who was one of over 600 nuns who were part of a study in the 1990s. The sisters volunteered to share their medical records, get annual cognitive and functional exams, and after death, donate their brains for autopsy. When a sister died, the team would get together, compare the results of the last exams before death with the results of the autopsy. Sister Bernadette was one of the stars of the convent. She was very active, taught middle school math until she was well into her 70s. And she scored very high on her cognitive exams up until her death at age 85 of a heart attack. The team gathered to compare her highly functional record to the results of her brain autopsy. And they were kind of surprised and shocked to find that her brain was riddled with plaques and tangles. On scoring criteria for Alzheimer's disease, there's a way to count the number of plaques and tangles and score from a 1 to 4, with 4 being most severe. And she did score a 4, showing the most severe amount of damage in her brain. There were other nuns with similar results, and through the 90s, other reports started to be published. Individuals functioning fine, but showing confirmed Alzheimer's disease at death. Various studies have reported that between 25% and 67% of subjects who were non-demented through repeated assessments fulfilled pathological criteria for dementia at autopsy. So many of these reports came out that researchers started labeling them as escapees and trying to figure out what they had in common. It was clear that these individuals had some protection against the impact of the disease. And it even came out, whether that decline was from aging or disease, that people varied in how much it affected their functioning. Yakov Stern is a researcher from Columbia University, and he took a look at all this evidence from Alzheimer's disease and the variability of individuals coping. He took a look at all the evidence from even normal cognitive decline and how it is that some people cope better than others with the same amount of damage to the brain. With cognitive reserve, the brain can withstand more damage before crossing the line of functional impairment to clinical diagnosis. So, what gives you cognitive reserve? After telling one patient the story of Sister Bernadette, that was her question. She just looked at me and she said, "Well, how do I get it?" The modern concept of cognitive reserve refers to the strength and flexibility of neural networks. And that's what has the potential to explain the difference in individual susceptibility to decline, whether from aging or disease. So think back a couple slides ago, the picture of the picture of the neuron connecting, and the video of the neurons connecting to each other. That is a neural network. And as I said then, these networks are built with each experience you have. Positive experiences, stimulating experiences, certain kinds of lifestyle choices and behaviors build positive neuroplasticity and build cognitive reserve. So, Adam, why don't you tell these folks what exactly it is that you can coach people about to build cognitive reserve?
Marie, thanks so much for explaining what cognitive reserve is. And that's a very detailed scientific term that most of our clients don't have the background to grasp. So when it comes to our clients, when they come in, I try to simplify it and maybe make it more towards language that they might understand. So how I like to talk about cognitive reserve is almost like a shield for your brain. So as you age, which none of us are ever going away from. We can't fight that battle and win that battle. But as we age, our brain will decline, right? We all know that. So the goal of building up this cognitive reserve is to put a shield around it to keep it strong, to allow you to minimize any type of performance decline that you may notice as a result of cognition declining. So I like to put it in terms of like a shield for your brain to allow it to stay strong and to protect it as you age or go through any type of cognitive decline or impairment. And I think what's really cool is within Activate Brain and Body programming, the workouts are structured where you're doing the functional training, exercise, you're getting the heart rate up. And we'll talk a lot more about it as these slides go on and as we talk about the pillars of brain health. But throughout the exercises and throughout the conversations that I'll have with the clients, it's so cool to see the change in emotion and the change in performance, both within the functional portion of the exercise and the cognitive portion where they're working at the brain game. And you can noticeably see that. And I know it's hard to quantify cognitive reserve going up and putting a number to it, but subjectively as a coach, from constant and effort and work within the sessions, you can actually see the clients more comfortable and confident with their abilities to execute certain movements and thoughts. So as we talk about the pillars of brain health, I really want to make sure you guys emphasize and know the first pillar that we're going to talk about is exercise. And physical activity is the most important one to remember throughout this whole presentation when it comes to brain health, both from a research and biological point of view. So let's get into the pillars of brain health. Marie, the next thing that I want to discuss are the 5 pillars to brain health. And through the next couple of slides, we're going to dissect and dive in a little bit more on each of these pillars. If exercise were a pill, it would be a $1 billion industry. And we talk about that all the time, whether it's anytime fitness and weight loss or Activate and brain health training. When it comes to exercise, it's strongly associated with reduced risk of dementia later in life. And there's a lot of research out there that supports that. And what they specifically found was that there's 2/3 of reduction in dementia if you start exercising in your middle ages. And they found there's a 50% reduction if you start in your 60s. So either way, the importance of regular exercise, and we'll talk more about what those recommendations are, but exercise reduces the risk of dementia later in life. And what they specifically found is that aerobic exercise increases the size of your memory center, which is your hippocampus. Specifically, and this is where Activate in the programming comes in, when you combine physical and cognitive exercises at the same time, that's the best benefit to reducing the risk of dementia later in life. And that's where the term cognitive reserve comes into play. It's making your brain stronger for when you age, and when your brain does get weaker, it's stronger. It has that shield to help it maintain the physical performance. When it comes to physical activity recommendations, they recommend 20 minutes per day, most days of the week, where you're working up to a moderate intensity, which is around 65 to 70% of your max heart rate. And the most important thing throughout all of this with brain health is to not be a couch potato. Actually, when you're a couch potato and you're living that sedentary lifestyle where you're not very active, it actually leads to a negative neuroplasticity. So you're not able to rejuvenate and have that elasticity within your brain. So when you're looking at brain health and weight loss and overall health, the most important thing is consistent movement throughout the day, 20 minutes per day, most days of the week. Now that we've wrapped up exercise as one of the pillars of brain health, we're going to move on to cognitive stimulation. When it comes to cognitive stimulation, you can develop your own, but to get the most benefit, it needs to be novel, challenging, and varied. So the example that I like to use when explaining this to clients is the idea of walking on a treadmill or walking around the block outside is very fixed. It's a fixed environment where your body and your mind know what to expect. For instance, on a treadmill, it's the belt that's always running at the constant speed that you choose without any hills, bumps, roots, etc. When it comes to walking around the block that you live in, you know that environment very well. So that's not very challenging or novel. Now, if you were to take that same movement or exercise as walking and throw in, let's say, hiking on a new trail, that's going to be very novel and challenging because the pathway that you're going through is different. It's new. You need to navigate a new territory. There might be roots, bumps, different hills that your brain and your body have to work together to overcome. So that's the kind of activity that we've put together at Activate. And the crazy stat that we talk about is brain training is a $1.3 billion per year business. And when we talk about brain training, we're referring to computer programs that are designed to give the brain that workout, right? Exercising different cognitive skills. And those different cognitive skills are different domains, such as memory, visual spatial, executive function, processing speed. So examples of that would be Lumosity and Brain HQ, where the client would log in, play a specific game or a workout for the brain that would work on memory, that would work on executive function. So at Activate, we've actually combined both concepts within a very specific program to make it a novel exercise to help build and grow that cognitive reserve. A common question that we get, and a common question that's out there is, can brain training and cognitive stimulation work? And the answer is absolutely yes. if it's novel and there's a variety to it, just like we discussed in the previous slide. The training must adapt to performance and require an increase in difficulty. So as those games and brain workouts are initially introduced to the client, it's going to be new and novel and be that variety to the client. But at some point, the client's going to get used to it, and it's not going to be novel anymore, and it's not going to be as challenging as it was when they first learned about it. So as they get more comfortable, as they get stronger with their brain, that game, that workout, that activity must increase in challenge, must increase in attention needed by the client to make sure that that brain training does work. Now that we've wrapped up cognitive stimulation, we're going to move on to the next pillar of brain health, of stress management. When it comes to stress, one of the most surprising things that I like to share and that people are really surprised about is that chronic stress actually inhibits glucose delivery. So when there's that excessive amount of stress that's placed on the body and the mind, your insulin levels will actually drop. And in simple terms, that just means that your blood sugar levels will rise. So when there's that stress that's constant, your blood sugar is higher. And long term, that can lead to a lot of health concerns if there is that consistent elevated amount of sugar that's not getting dispersed and isn't regulated by that insulin. So that stress will actually decrease insulin levels, creating that higher amount of blood sugar. Stress hormones also begin to damage neurons, especially their connections. So this doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to forget certain aspects, right, or forget certain memories. It'll just be harder to access them. And lastly, very prolonged exposure to extreme stress, so PTSD, that leads to major atrophy of the hippocampus and neuronal death. So any information that is tied to that neuron will be gone at that point. So it's very important that we're managing that stress and becoming more relaxed. And in the next slide, we'll talk about ways to relax and manage that stress. When it comes to managing stress and finding ways to relax, it varies by each individual. What might work for me might not be something that works for you. So you need to make sure that you find something specific that you'll do. The common question that I like to share is, I'll get, what's the best exercise? And my answer is, it's the one that you're going to do safely and consistently. The most important aspect with stress management and relaxing is to make sure you're doing it on a regular, consistent basis. So some simple ideas would include meditation, yoga, tai chi, various breathing techniques, a massage, and even exercise, right? There's various levels of stress and certain types of stress that meditation might allow you to relax in some scenarios and maybe exercise in another. So you have to make sure that you find a strategy and specifics that work to you. The next of the 5 pillars that we're going to discuss about brain health is nutrition. So we'll take a deeper dive here. When it comes to brain health and nutrition, you want to know the Mediterranean diet. And when you research that, it varies by country and region, but in general, it's high in vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, beans, grains, fish, and unsaturated fats, such as olive oil. It usually includes a low intake of meat and dairy foods, as you guys can see in this slide here. There was a research study done, and they actually showed that the Mediterranean diet lowered the risk of Alzheimer's by as much as 53% in participants who strictly followed the diet, and even 35% in those who followed it moderately well. So when it comes to brain health and nutrition, you want to avoid those red meats, butters, cheeses, and fried and fast foods, right? The more processed. you want to stick to more of the whole foods, the green leafy vegetables, berries, and wild caught fish. The last of the 5 pillars of brain health that we're going to discuss is socialization. So we'll take a deep dive here. When it comes to socialization in brain health, I want to use these two specific research studies to really show a key component of activate brain and body programming. And it has to do with working out in a group of people and the establishment of close relationships. And you guys can see here on the slide some of the really neat information that the studies found. But when there were individuals that worked out in a group setting, which is what we'll do at Activate Brain and Body, they actually found that those individuals that participated in that group had decreased stress levels and had better mental and physical well-being at the end of a 12-week fitness program versus their peers who went for solo fitness sessions or who exercised only with one partner. They didn't experience the same type of improvements. So we want to take that concept and we're replicating that socialization aspect of brain health into our programming, which is really neat to see. And then another study showed the idea of close friends. And what they found is that those individuals who had tight-knit relationships had better cognitive health. So it's very important to us and to everybody that you have relationships with others and that we are social beings. We're human beings, we're meant to be in tribes and close to others. So it's important that as we age, we keep those relationships and continue to develop new ones. Now that we've discussed the 5 pillars of brain health, we need to discuss how that fits in to activate brain and body programming. One of the key terms that we use is BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And what that is it's a signal that goes into your blood that sparks more brain activity in simple terms. And what we do is within our programming, it's functional exercises that focus on getting the heart rate into that 60 to 75% of that max heart rate. And the goal is that BDNF is going to improve the function of neurons and it's going to encourage new neurons to grow. Now, earlier we were talking about cognitive stimulation as one of the brain pillars, and the most important idea is that it's novel. So when you combine a novel activity, which in our case is a brain game that we use through technology, and heart rate being between 60 and 75%, you have your BDNF, which is elevated because of that heart rate elevation, and you're going to link it with a brain component. Okay, when you have that, that's called dual tasking. It's working the brain and body at the same time. And that dual tasking allows the new neurons to be assigned to a task and remain alive. And that's where I think the common myth that Marie was talking about earlier of once you have neurons, they never come back. They only come back and they stay when it's assigned to something. And that's where that novel and challenging scenario or experience with that elevated heart rate of the BDNF increase allows it to stay there. And so one of the core principles that we have within our programming is dual tasking. After clients go through the programming, some of the initial thoughts that we discussed earlier where the brain can't be changed and I have little control over it and brain health means Sudoku and crosswords really starts to change. And I put 3 quotes on here that really made a huge impact into what Marie and I do. For instance, Mary spoke about where every year she has a big family gathering. And I remember having this conversation with her. And we asked her, what are some things that you're noticing outside of the fitness facility? And she specifically spoke about how every year she's in charge of the big family gathering at Christmas. And normally she feels very stressed out because it's 20 people, family, in-laws, everyone's there. It's on her to put this show together. And she often feels overwhelmed, stressed out, and normally has to take shortcuts or make things do. She's not very happy with it. And this year, after going through the program for a few months, she said she had the big family gathering and she felt less overwhelmed and was actually able to get everything done and enjoy it for once. And you should have seen her face. You could just see the sigh of relief when she was thinking about it on she was actually able to relax during a very stressful situation and enjoy time with their family. That was very impactful to me. Sally was talking about how normally her and her husband will wake up and it takes a while to get the day going. It'll kind of wake up and see how the body feels and see how the mind feels and if they can actually take on the task for the day. And sometimes they decide not to because they just don't feel up to it. Now, after doing the program for a few months, much like Mary, her and her husband wake up on a regular basis and they feel ready to conquer the day. They get up, they do their errands, and they're able to spend time together afterwards because they're not so worried about the tasks in the day. And then Laura was talking about how she used to teach gymnastics in the past, and she had to remember all of the girls' names. And recently, she noticed she wasn't able to remember all of them because she has a granddaughter that's that age and doing gymnastics. And she said one of the things that she recently noticed from doing the program or since joining the program is she's able to remember those girls' names a lot quicker and a lot easier. And it's helping her remember her granddaughter's classmates that she's in. And much like Mary and Sally, just seeing the face and the emotion while they're talking about that was worth every penny. And so it's a really powerful concept when you can put the functional training with those pillars of brain health together. There's a really huge impact that can happen.
Adam, it's been so good to work with you on this talk and our whole Activate project. I love hearing about how this research and the concept of cognitive reserve can take hold in clients' minds and really motivate them to work towards a positive brain future. I was meeting with a patient this morning. She's approaching 70 and thinking about aging, and her brain is very important to her. She came into the appointment this morning insistent that she wants to age differently than her parents. When they were approaching 70, they were planning for decline, and by doing so, they were actually inviting decline. She's someone who loves the idea of cognitive reserve, the idea that the way she lives her life now can help build a reserve, or to use your word, Adam, can help shield her from the effects of cognitive decline, whether that declines from normal aging or a disease process. When I met her, her life consisted of sitting in front of her computer and going out to eat. She works full time and thought she had a cognitively stimulating life. She was using her brain a lot and thought that that put her ahead of the game. But with a combination of Sister Bernadette and research stories, she has shifted. She now exercises almost every day, pays attention to a Mediterranean diet, and reaches out a lot more to her friends. We're not talking about a cure for dementia or for the process of aging. You only get yourself in trouble if that's what you're communicating to your clients. You live long enough and function will eventually give way. Sister Bernadette died at age 85 with a significant disease process in her brain. If she had lived into her 90s, at some point her reserve would have been used up. But she would have had those extra valuable years of functioning. So, my wrap up instruction to you is find a way to tell the story of cognitive reserve that fits with your style. And don't forget, and I'm sure you won't, the importance of physical activity for cognitive reserve.
It's now one of the first questions I ask people when they come to me, whether it's for an anxiety treatment or a brain assessment. One of the first things I ask them is, what is the role of physical activity in your life? So that's right up your alley. You guys have the corner on cognitive reserve. And so, to help you with coming up with your story of cognitive reserve, we've included a handout on building reserve, giving you some additional ideas, some additional research citations. And so, have kind of fun doing that and making it your own. Because this is a recorded presentation, we're not available in real time for Q&A, but we've included our email addresses here. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or comments, or you want clarification on a point that we've made. So thank you very much for your time and attention.